Nothing More by William Zeranski. Russell said, "You're going to die." He meant it, and Taylor knew it was true. That was one of the many truths they discussed while occupying bar stools. He returned his friend's smile. Certain things in life were inevitable. So what next? Russell drove Taylor to the ER, and then helped him out of the passenger side of the car, walked him to the sliding door to the entrance, getting close enough for Taylor to waddle inside, holding a hand to his abdomen. Inside, a hospital attendant stood, mask on, acting as if Taylor was a bomber. Russell patted him on the shoulder. "Yep, you're gonna die. But more than likely, not today. Call me later." Taylor nodded, stepped through the sliding door, past the attendant, whose only act of attending was to point to a window behind which a woman sat at a keyboard. She asked him questions, repeated questions, because of her voice being muffled by a mask on which was printed the hospital logo. The question she asked could have been better answered by reading his driver's license. Considering how he felt, he didn't give a damn about the questions or the answers. And yes, he was still 34 years old. The ER attendant snapped into action, grudgingly it seemed, the moment Taylor finished checking in, and fumbling to get the plastic insurance card back into his wallet while fighting a sudden urge to vomit. He was wheeled from admissions to the ER proper, passing a row of closed curtains. A vague refrigerator odor hung in the air. The attendant deposited him in a cubicle and pulled the curtain shut. Dr. Singh, mask on and wearing a white lab coat, entered through a curtain and asked the same questions June, the ER nurse, had asked after helping him slide onto the bed. Singh requested that Taylor undo his belt and pull down his trousers, allowing him to press the area of Taylor's lower right abdomen, at which a rocketing pain shot through his stomach, up his esophagus, and out of his mouth as something louder than a grunt. Was the first thing the doctor said. Taylor was unsure of the expression on the physician's face, but it didn't look good, which did match up with Taylor's mood, physical condition, and the whirling ache that now spun through his skull. It was then, and in rapid succession, June assisted him in changing from street clothes into a hospital gown. The conversation was as buoyant as it could possibly be. He grinned, she grinned, or smiled. He couldn't tell because of the mask, but he thought he saw something around her eyes. During the process of changing, he considered calling work, leaving a message with someone, calling home, his parents of course, considering he lived on his own and had done so for the last 10 years. But reaching for his trousers and the phone still stuffed in a side pocket became an action well beyond his control. He considered asking the nurse to get the phone, but the spin the world suddenly took grabbed all of his attention. He almost vomited again. He felt warm now. Yes, his temperature had been taken when he first arrived in the ER cubicle, somewhere around 100, but now he actually felt a fever like a warm sheen rising along the surface of his body. "I'm hot," he said, and dropped back on the bed. The coolness of the sheet seemed to shock his exposed neck and back. June touched his face, noted his discomfort, and she said she'd be right back. A moment or so passed, and a different nurse appeared. His name was Joe, and his voice was muffled by his mask as he informed Taylor he was going to start an IV. Taylor didn't care. He didn't like needles, but he didn't care. His mind had already moved somewhere else, somewhere blank and quiet. The room stretched and pulled around him. He felt as if he were sinking into the mattress, and it was then he lost his war against vomiting. Chunky yellow bile exited his mouth, streaming along the pillow under his head and across the sheet of the bed and hitting the floor with a splat, making a Jackson Pollock-like design on the formica. Joe said shit and instantly apologized and called for help, having on latex gloves and an exposed IV catheter in one hand. June arrived almost immediately, and seeing what was going on, called for Dr. Singh, and then made efforts to comfort Taylor, wiped the vomit from his face, bed, and floor. Joe, in an instant, inserted the needle and adjusted the flow of a plastic bag of IV solution dangling from a chrome pole, which he inserted into a hole at the head of the bed. The pain in Taylor's abdomen expanded, hot, scalding, flooding through his body in a septic rush. His eyes opened wide, and a wailing noise came out of his mouth. He saw Dr. Singh at the gap in the curtain. It was determined that at some point the appendicitis ruptured. Peritonitis rapidly set in. A week later, Taylor died on Monday. The viewing, arranged by his family, was held at a funeral home on that Thursday in another state. His friend Russell was too upset to attend.